What's up, everybody? For those of you who don't know, my name is Christian Brooks. This is the Do Your Homework Podcast, episode 1. There are some of you who may have been waiting on this for a while now, and I apologize for not getting this out to you guys sooner. I wanted to have a better aesthetic than the one we have set up right now, but I believe this is good enough, and I wanted to start somewhere. If you wait for things to be perfect, you'll never get started, and I thought the content was the most important thing, especially with the fourth debate coming up tomorrow, and this election cycle being one of the biggest reasons for me really coming out of my shell and putting my ideas out there. I thought it was important to give everyone a basis as to why we're doing this, how I got on this journey, and sort of what to expect as we move forward. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Information has never been more accessible ever in human history, but the caveat to that is that while good information is more accessible, bad information is also more accessible. And I've been a huge critic of all forms of new media, really. Social media, especially. I feel like most of what we see on there is an extension of bullshit reality TV. And with an Instagram profile, everybody has their own show. And it's not something that I feel like is conducive to living a productive and happy life. So it's something that I've rejected. However, I've come to understand that while these things, when used or perceived in a certain light, especially the one that I was looking at, it can be harmful. It can also be of good use in that they've expanded the marketplace of ideas, and that the marketplace of ideas is now more accessible than ever. And I was really doing myself a disservice, and many like me a disservice. We've all been doing ourselves a disservice by not putting ourselves out there and by not competing in this marketplace of ideas. And so in a world of social media branding, our brand is going to be authenticity. This is going to be the realest reality TV show. And my bet is that it's going to work. So I appreciate you guys for coming on this journey with me. I hope we continue to do it for a long time, and I hope it's very fruitful for not just myself, obviously, but for everybody involved. I think one of the reasons we've gotten rotten in our industry is that our establishments have gotten rotten, especially that in cable media and news outlets. They've gotten very stagnant and comfortable pushing misinformation for their own agendas and their own cause. They do completely understand the power that they have. They are no fool in understanding that they are the ones who control the thoughts and minds of everyone. And they essentially push whatever they need to push. They are as different as they need to be to have competition, but as in line as they can be to keep their incumbency status intact and basically keep the lower socioeconomic classes ignorant and distracted from whatever their real goals are. Thankfully, and one of the awesome things about this new media that I got to give it credit for is it gives somebody like me, just a guy in the middle of the country sitting at his desk, a chance to compete with the likes of NBC, Fox, or CNN for your time in order to get my ideas out there in this marketplace. And that's one of the awesome things about this. And so I'm going to use that lever, and I'm going to pull on it as hard as I can. And I hope that we get somewhere with it. What we're really going to be doing throughout a lot of this is calling out their most bullshit tool, which is statistics. These stats can tell you anything. I'll give you a quick example, and then we'll move on. One of the main reasons I'm doing this, like I said, is the election, and we'll talk a little bit about that coming up here in a moment. If you look at some of these polls, how they poll people matter. Their methodology certainly matters. A few months ago, I was looking at a poll, some different polls, and I saw one that had Vivek in second place. That was using a mix of random cell numbers, text messages, emails to get respondent data for their poll. That poll had Vivek Ramaswamy in second place. There was another poll that was using a random dialer for landlines that had him behind Mike Pence in seventh place. This was, like I said, 3 months ago, 3.5 months ago. Why is that important? Why is that methodology important? Well, who the fuck has a landline? What kind of selection bias is that you're only picking people who have a landline? My grandparents have a landline, I think. I don't know if they answer it. My grandma has a cell phone, so I call her on that. So you got to be really careful when you look at polls and statistics because they can pick numbers from anywhere. They can pick respondents from anywhere. I'll give you another example. If they're weighing their results, if they're saying, oh, well, this person's gone to 7 caucuses, so we'll weigh their response differently. Well, 7 caucuses is 28 years. Assuming that you voted in every single election that you could be in, you're at least 56. At least. Closer to 50. And so they're basically weighing the opinion of an older person more than they would that of a younger person. It doesn't make any sense. Don't listen to it. It's stupid. But to move on, during the course of these conversations, we're going to talk about not only the current events, but some of the history behind them to have a better understanding of what's going on, and then how we can move forward. I think it's very difficult to react on a situation in the present without understanding how you got there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about not only what's happening, but how we got here, and then hopefully provide some clarity on how we can move forward. And I hope that in doing so, we can have a better understanding of the truth. We'll find more common ground in our goals, and we'll start to begin a sensible dialogue on how to build a better future for our country. And I hope this sparks some conversation in your guys' day-to-day lives as well. I don't want this just to be me talking to myself to a bunch of people on a podcast. I hope that you guys take this information and you go and, make some use of it in your day-to-day lives. Now, how did I get here? What really inspired me, I've referenced it just a moment ago with the election cycle. And not just the election cycle, because like many young people, I've been disillusioned from politics for a long time. It's all bullshit. And we're starting to see how BS it is, but it's time that we stand up and call out its bullshit. And I thought Vivek Ramaswamy, when I got introduced to him about 4 months ago, is the candidate that I could get behind to do that. Seeing how he made his money, he called the bluff of Big Pharma, saying that, basically your business model is set up such that scientists are taking on all the risk without getting any of the reward, and you have sort of a herd mentality in deciding what markets you'll participate in and which ones you won't based on what's popular at the time. And so he said, you guys are leaving behind a lot of good stuff. I'm going to call your bluff. You say that doesn't work. I think it does. And in that process, 5 FDA approved drugs, 1 a life-saving medicine in children. Somebody taking on a huge incumbency like that, calling their bluff and saying, I can do this better than you, that warrants some consideration and a fair bit of admiration for how he went about it. And now the IC's taken that same approach to the political establishment and the media establishment. And I've seen, and I called it as soon as I started listening to him and started paying attention to his campaign and a lot of his policies, which we'll get into in some later stuff. I guarantee it'll come up when I talk about the debate tomorrow, is that they are going after him with everything they got because they fear him. I've seen it. And I know that it's going to take more people speaking out. And I've seen more people speaking out. Some of you guys who watch my Snapchats have seen me post screenshots where they say, oh, well, Nikki Haley's ahead of him in the polls. Well, go watch Forbes. They have an hour, 45-minute long video where it's Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Nikki Haley sitting in Iowa speaking to voters. It's had hundreds of thousands of views. Look at all the top comments. They're all pro-Vivek. All of them. Not a single one's pro-Nikki. Not a single one is pro-Ron DeSantis. And yet they'll say both are ahead of him in the polls. It's bullshit. He's called their bluff. They hate him. They've been attacking him. And I think it's placed upon people like myself to call it out and share that with other people and let them know that we are having success calling their bluff and that this is the most important election of our lifetime. To give you some more context or substance as to why that is, when I was born, the U.S. national debt was $5 trillion, which isn't horrible. It's not great, but it's not horrible. Last year, I believe the United States IRS reported about $5 trillion in tax revenues. So it's not the end of the world. 28 years later, in December of 2023, we have a $33 trillion debt, over $33 trillion in debt. We only have 5 years left. December of 2028. That fiscal year, because if you know, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but the fiscal year for the federal government starts on October 1st. So literally 5 years from now, that fiscal year of, what will that be, 2029, our interest on our national debt will be the highest line item on our U.S. budget. The highest line item on the U.S. budget will be the national debt. When that happens, it's over. That's 5 years from now. That's one presidential election cycle, 2 congressional cycles, with the midterm elections that'll happen in 2026. We got 2 Congresses and 1 administration to figure this out before the whole thing goes tits up. It's over with. What do things look like in the meantime? How are things looking today? Well, if you look at the stats that the White House and many people on NBC give you, they'll tell you things like GDP growth is up 5% from last quarter, that there are jobs created, that unemployment's only 4%, and that we are not in a recession. The truth, as I'm sure most of you know, is much more complicated. Excuse me. The truth is that the GDP has not grown 5% in a year, a full calendar year, much less a quarter, since the 1970s. And the only reason it grew 5% is because it had room to. It had gone down to a point where it had room to grow 5%. Okay, it's not like it started high and went way higher. Okay, don't let them lie to you like that. The hard fact really about it, and why was it down in the first place? Bad policy. Just straight up a bad COVID response policy. And we can go into more details with that later. The hard fact is that the only reason that they are not calling a recession is because government expenditure of money we don't have is keeping us upright. And there's proof in that. If you look at the labor statistics from October, they reported 150,000 person increase in total non-farm payroll due to increases in healthcare, government, and social services. So either the government itself or government subsidized areas added jobs. This happened in spite of the manufacturing strike of the auto workers. So in spite of hundreds of thousands of people going on strike, we still added 150,000 jobs in government or government adjacent areas. This does not account for the billions of dollars given to defense contractors to fund proxy wars on behalf of the United States government, or energy policies that have artificially constrained oil supply, which have increased the price and thus the profit margins for oil suppliers. Those are the only things keeping this economy upright. This is not happening organically through the free marketplace. In fact, it's just the opposite. If you do your homework, you'll see people are buying out of the system. Gold is nearing record highs. Bitcoin has doubled in less than 9 months, and not for the first or second time. Meanwhile, Walmart is reporting a 2% decrease in operational margins. Why would Walmart be decreasing in operational margins if they were just artificially increasing price and that inflation wasn't real and still pervasive in 2023? Do a little bit of thinking there. This demonstrates clearly that while the media and the White House will tell you that we're doing better, Americans and others around the world are not buying their bullshit. They don't believe it at all. And they are looking for other mediums. They are looking for other things to buy into, other alternatives, such as gold as a unit of account and as a savings, such as cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange for daily goods. They're listening to podcasts like everybody who's tapped in with me today. They're not going to Fox or NBC for their news anymore. People have rejected the system. Once people have rejected and lost faith in the system, that is when a recession happens while faith is being restored and inefficiencies are being solved. That is a natural part of the economic cycle. It happens. This one was aided mainly in part due to the government because the government's interfered way too much in our free market. But that's the natural cycle of economics. You go into recession, then you go into recovery. That's just how it works. And the bottom line is people are tired of listening to the bullshit. They're tired of the experts. People want their voices heard on the marketplace of ideas, and it is open to everyone. It is not reserved for whoever's hosting the nightly news on Fox TV. The marketplace of ideas is open to everybody, a right granted to us by our Creator, not something that is gifted to us by the First Amendment of the Constitution. However, to understand how people get this confused and start to believe that government is somehow the end-all be-all of their lives, we have to talk about how political associations are formed in the first place. How does governance come about? I'm going to be pulling a lot of this from Aristotle's Politics, in which he basically breaks down individuals and their naturally formed associations for the purpose of advancing needs and wants that are outside of their own capabilities. And you need each of these associations in order. You can't skip any steps here in order to create the polis. All right, and we can talk more in detail next week about why when we talk about the ideal state. But for now, I just want everybody with me to imagine going from one single caveman to the Republic of Rome. All right, so imagine you're one person, and then you scale it up to the Republic of Rome. How does this happen? All right, you start with the individual. Each individual is unique. They have wants, desires, needs beyond what they can fulfill for themselves. The most natural and universal is the need to procreate. Man needs a woman needs a man. This leads to mate selection and the creation of the household. Once you have the creation of the household, this is the most natural form of association. All right, this is the first and most natural form of association of human beings. Man, woman, their children. Household must be able to acquire means for its own self-sufficiency. Household has to feed itself, provide itself with water, shelter, education, and instilling values into their children. However, it has obligations outside of that, which leads into the village. The village is essentially an offshoot of the family. I have a dad who has brothers and sisters who have kids who I'm close to, my cousins, my nephew, etc., etc. That is essentially the formation of the village. Okay, the village still has wants and needs beyond its own capacity, the most tangible of which are things like roads, bridges, post office, marketplace, post offices, marketplaces, the ability to legislate laws, the ability to enforce the laws, the ability to have judiciaries to interpret the laws, mutual defense of the villages. All of these things lead us to create what in Aristotle's words are the final and perfect association, which is the polis, which he calls the height of full self-sufficiency and is the natural consummation of all the other parts that precede it. Right? Through this process, we see that political associations are actually natural to the human experience. Human beings need communities. It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well. You'll see this in all sorts of other psychology, the need for community, the need to be a part of something bigger than yourself, the need for that thing to then be part of something bigger than itself, right? That's how you expand these things out into political associations. There's no escaping it, all right? Now, today the polis is the state. I would argue that the most natural form of self-governance is the city. And we'll talk more about that stuff as we get into the ideal state. Right now, I want to talk about how our Constitution takes the polis to a new level with the federal government. So what is the purpose of the state or the polis under the Constitution? Purpose of the state is to essentially create an environment for the municipalities to self-govern, allow the people, the households, the villages, the cities to self-govern, and in doing so, each will naturally compete with itself and create its own value set. That will provide a multitude of available services or value sets for constituents. So say you live in Topeka, but you don't like some of the city ordinances in Topeka, you're not in touch with the value set of Topeka, whatever the case may be, you can then move to Lawrence. You could move to Leavenworth. You could move to Wichita, whatever the case may be. The state provides the framework for you to do that. That also includes freedom of movement. That allows people to vote with their feet, ideally. Again, we'll talk more about that next week. And then lastly, it is to encourage freedom of commerce and provide infrastructure and defense in service of said commerce. So basically, the state's job is to create an environment where people are free to do as they please within the legislature of the state. That is it. And they then provide the infrastructure, provide the environment for the free market to play itself out. And then the states create the union for the same purpose. Okay? So the union is created by the states to ensure that the states are playing by the same set of rules, that they have the ability to self-govern, that they have the ability to compete for constituents, that people are free to move within the borders of the United States. People are allowed to vote with their feet within the United States. The United States government encourages freedom of commerce between the states, provides infrastructure and defense for that commerce. That is what it's there for. Now, how do all of these things operate in relation to each other ideally? That is something we'll get more into next week. Tap in with me tomorrow. I'll certainly be doing something, like I said, for the debate tomorrow and Thursday. Talk more about the economy and some current events, what to expect for the next debate. And then again, the main reason I did this, guys, it's very important that we pay attention, hugely important. The generation before us was falling asleep at the wheel for decades. And as Plato said, the price good men pay for indifference to politics is to be ruled by evil. I don't want to be ruled by evil. I don't want my children to be ruled by evil. So it's time for us to pay attention and do our homework. Until next time.